All right. Um, well, these are always great, aren't they? um, God, where do I begin? Fear and anxiety. Um, you know, something that I've been paying attention to a lot recently because I've been coming in and out of the doctor's office and so on. Uh, you know, I think the last time I talked about how previously I couldn't understand if I was having anxiety. Um, and obviously, I mean, for those of you that don't know, or I guess just catching up, I've been in the army for 6 years. I'm finally leaving everything behind, and I'm, going somewhere new. Things are unknown, um, and so on. Uh, so I haven't been able to sleep for the past, I think, like 2 weeks. And, you know, you'd be lying. I'd be lying to say if it hasn't been affecting my mental health, my physical health, everything. Um, so I finally went to the doctor today. Um, and I've been having headaches and crazy stuff. Anyways, I I scored high on the insomnia chart, so I guess that makes sense. Um, but you know what? Just a little side note. I totally have beef with like this propositional, like I guess understanding of like my health or whatever, because the scale was like, yeah, do you really want to sleep? Like, how bad do you want to sleep? Do you want to sleep really bad or not bad at all? And there's like kind of like a scale of like, yeah, I kind of want to sleep, kind of don't want to sleep. Oh, I think the hardest question that I had answering, like trying to answer, was, do you feel down or depressed? And I'm just like, I mean, bro, I can't fucking sleep. like, like, I feel like that just makes sense, right? Like, you, like I'm frustrated that I can't sleep, um, and all this other stuff. And it's like, yeah, but are you down or depressed? I'm like, oh my God, dude. Like, I hate these propositional questions like this, and you want me to put it on a scale? So I'm like, yeah, sure, somewhat. So by saying somewhat, I basically, well, the doctor referred me to behavioral health, and this is the part that I'm talking about. So the lady just reads it off to me like, yeah, I mean, so you scored high on insomnia, and based on what you said, you have mild anxiety and depression. And there was like this just random funny joke that came to my mind, just randomly. It felt like when I was watching the play Vanya with my friend Dawood, where Uncle Vanya is saying, "I could have been a Schopenhauer, I could have been Dostoevsky or whatever," and I had like a similar thought, more like in the sense of like, oh well, aren't all great men neurotic? you know, don't all great men have some type of grand issue? Um, I just kind of made that funny joke to myself. Anyways, I don't know. That made me laugh in the midst of the situation. It was just kind of like a sarcastic joke to myself. Um, anyways, so I was, I recently took a shower, hence my wonderful look. Um, and I was, I'm still really struggling, honestly, with the idea. I mean, I didn't get like diagnosed with anxiety or whatever. Like the lady said, like it would take several visits from me and like a whole like walkthrough process, stuff like that. But um, anyways, I was just like thinking, like, how I kept thinking about how can I be anxious, right? And this kind of just happened, like, like literally 30 minutes ago. As I'm like taking a shower, I'm like thinking, I'm like, wait a second, like this doesn't. I'm like trying to walk myself through, like, how does this make any sense? And then suddenly, I was like, why would I be afraid of any of this? It just rationally doesn't make any sense. And then when I said rational, it like triggered a thought. And I said, oh my God. That's because fear is completely non-rational. Or I'm just kind of using Daniel from OG Rose's kind of terms here, but we could say it's irrational, but because they were saying, like, the doctor, I remember he was saying, like, oh yeah, I mean, like, most people aren't actually conscious of their uh like anxiety, and I was like, okay, I mean, I guess that makes sense, right? but but this is the part that really starts like being kind of humorous, is that it was my mother that provoked me to kind of go see the doctor. And I'm like telling her, I'm like, look, mom, like I can't like sleep. I want to sleep so bad. I got this headache. I got like I'm constantly like just feeling my pulses all the time. And it literally feels like it's driving me insane. Um, and she just said, my mom, as motherly as possible, she's like, oh yeah. She's like, you've always done this. And I'm kind of like, what do you mean? She's like, well, every time you go through like a big change, ever since you're little, ever since you go through a big change, you've done this. And I'm like, done what? And she's like, you get sick, you get whatever, like something goes wrong with you, like with your body, basically. Every time there's like a huge transition in your life. She's like, you've done that ever since you got your little brother when he was born. She's like, you did that in kindergarten, you did that in middle school, you did that in high school, and all this other stuff. And I'm sitting there like, I don't remember any of this. Like, it must be so blocked out from my memories, so shut out that I just don't remember that at all. I don't remember it. It's it feels completely inaccessible. And it even reminded me when my grandmother used to tell me, like, she always had this funny story that she used to tell me about, like, when she was like holding my cousin, like my cousin, she's like a year younger than me. And when we were small, we would be at my grandma's house, and my grandma said that she decided to, kind of like take turns, like picking one child up and carrying the other and stuff like that. But she said that when she put me down and she picked up my baby cousin, uh, that I just had like the biggest fit. I was like pulling my hair and like screaming. Um, and I'm just like, you know, like for me, I'm so bewildered, really, like just bewildered that I had any behavior like that. Um, because I'm just not a enthusiastic, uh, I guess that's the word, or I don't want to say exaggerated, but I'm just not an enthusiastic like person about my suffering. You know, you could say I almost have like a very stoic look with my suffering. Um, but I didn't realize that until my mother literally said, she said these words. She said these exact words. And I feel like they were so profound to me because it was tailored exactly at me. She said, yeah, you've always been like this. She's like, somehow your body reacts, but you never react. And I was like, oh my God. um, I mean, you know, talk about like literal disembodied, you know, literal disembodiedness, uh, literal disembodiedness. And, you know, man, at this point, I'm just like, well, I'm looking back at my dreams. Because actually, surprisingly, the doctor did say something about, what have your dreams been like? And like, I kind of just like, look, man, like, I've had like zero sleep, so I haven't been really having any dreams. Um, but looking at the dreams the one dream that I talked about beforehand, I think it was like 2 videos ago, about, I think, like the show don't tell kind of thing. I think, if I were to put this correctly, I think my unconscious, right, was literally telling me, right? It's going to tell me by showing me uh, that that I do have all these fears and, possible anxieties and all this stuff, right? Because I remember the dream explicitly said, basically like, don't tell me, show me, right? And it's funny because like I just knew that line was so haunting when I heard it in my dream, and I just didn't know what to do with it. And I tried to make sense of it in the video, but I think once my mother kind of connected the dots for me about her saying like, "Oh yeah, your body has always reacted, but you never have." Um, I'm like, okay, it's also interesting that I think one of my best friends told me, she's like, she's like, yeah, maybe maybe you need to like connect with your body. She's like, yeah, maybe you need to connect with your body or something. Um, and it's funny because I was thinking about, what does that even mean? What does that even mean, to connect with your body? Um, because basing it off of what my mother told me, right, that I've always, gone through major pains with transition, and my body has always kind of reacted, and I never reacted. Clearly there's a huge disconnect between, you know, me and my actual body. There seems like a huge uh, disconnect almost, it seems like. But yeah. Uh, and so I guess now understanding and like gripping with the fact that fear, the whole time I kept telling myself about Arizona, I'm like, well, it just doesn't make any sense to be afraid of moving, of doing all these transition process. But once it hit me that a fear is in essence non-rational, right? Or um, like rationality is not gonna make sense of that, really, right? They're gonna they're gonna tell me that I'm afraid, but I'm still, that's like the one thing that I was really struggling with. I was like, I was having people tell me, well, you're probably, you know, afraid, you probably have anxiety over this move, you're probably having all this stuff. And I'm just like listening to it. I'm like, this doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't connect. It doesn't make any sense at all. Um, and like I basically I put myself in a position where I'm like, I just want to sincerely disagree with you. uh, but you know, I started, but then I started realizing I'm like, yeah, that's it. That's the whole point. It doesn't make sense, and it's not going to make sense. Um, you know, and I think that was like, I don't know. I feel like that was kind of like hard, like a hard truth to swallow for me. Um, because even when the lady, even when like the mental health lady was like, you know, walking it out with me, she's like, okay, so, what's what's there for you, like what's the next step for you in Arizona or whatever, she said some question like that. I literally was just like, what do you mean? It's probably because I was so tired and like, haven't slept, that I was just like, I don't understand these silly ambiguous questions. And she like clarified, she's like, well, like, what are you going to do in Arizona? And I was like, okay, well, what are my plans? I'm like, okay, but just the way she said it was just so ambiguous. I was like, I don't understand, like what do you mean? It's unknown. But I mean, that's really what I felt like shouting. I was like, it's unknown. It's unknown. I don't know. You tell me what's next. Oh, that's the question. She said, what's next in Arizona? And I was like, I don't know. When I get there, I'll figure it out, I guess. Um, uh, but yeah, the this non rationality. Um, but Daniel, you're gonna get brought up in this talk, so happy days. I was reading some of your article on Anselm Anselm. I don't know, the ontological argument basically for God, of God's the greatest possible being, so on and so on. I really like that article you wrote. And you started talking about non-rational and rationality, and this is kind of really what really began like the foundation for my thinking today. Because I was like, what's actually kind of funny is like, non-rationality, you could say, is kind of like these are just like my thoughts. I don't know how I don't know how like coherent they're gonna be, because I think today I'm gonna take my Ambien. So right after this. So hopefully the next 3 days I can actually have some good sleep. Um, but I started thinking, like non-rationality must be like in a parallel sense, like substance almost, right? And rationality is more like, you know, what that substance allows you to unveil, essentially, right? And I keep thinking of like a ladder, and like rationality is kind of like a ladder, um, where you can climb, you can see more, you can see down further, you can examine stuff like that, start making sense. But really, like everything else is around it is kind of like non-rational, and rationality can be kind of like the eye. I don't know. Um, but anyways, what I just I'm kind of went on a tangent there. But what I wanted to bring up was when I was thinking about fear, I was thinking about how there's this kind of like irony about God in terms of like actually a lot of the predicate on kind of like living for God and like understanding God is to have like fear of God, which is, if we take fear in itself, and we've already identified fear as kind of like not rational. I think that's kind of like already interesting that, you know, there is like you can have like a rush understanding of like religion and and theology and so on, and all these denominations and diversities of religion and so on. We can make sense of this like rationally and like have justification for maybe specific denominations of Christianity or specific religions, but overall there is this overwhelming aspect of non-rational um, element that is, and I'm not saying non-rational in a negative sense. I'm definitely meaning this in a positive sense, by the way. And I believe Daniel means to put it in a positive sense too. But Daniel, correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, I feel like the whole predicate of knowing God or wanting to live by God is like the fear of God, right? So it's actually it's already provoking you to be outside the bounds of rationality, or if anything, at least it points to the fact that rationality already has its limits, because it's already hard to rationalize fear when you're afraid of something. And this is just coming now from my own experiences. When you're afraid of something, you can try to rationalize it. You can say, well, it's probably this and this. But in the end, like what happened to me, is I still feel this disconnect, because I'm just like, that still doesn't make any sense, honestly. It just doesn't match up in my mind. um, but I don't know. I thought that was actually really interesting. Like uh, a negative proof. It wouldn't be like a positive proof, but it'd be like more like a negative proof. It would be more like, uh, you know, out of all the possible fears. I'm just, I'm kind of messing here, but anyways, um, yeah, I think that's all I have the energy for. So, all right, yeah, take care, guys. All right, later, bye.